Merry Christmas, good morning, and welcome to Christmas Day. Yes, folks, it's been a whole year since I last recorded one of these traditional little videos for you and I to share. Normally, I record my Christmas Eve video on Christmas Eve, on the morning of Christmas Eve. I sort of get up early, and normally everyone has arrived for Christmas, and they're all asleep upstairs, and that's my time just to soak up the quiet of the day, to unwind and to begin to prepare for Christmas. Forget about work, maybe wrap some presents, and just get ready for a few days of solid relaxation. And I did do that yesterday. I did try to record this video yesterday morning, but unfortunately the sound just didn't work. Basically, I forgot to turn the mic on. So and by the time I was done, people were starting to wake up. I could hear footsteps and people stirring in the house, and that magical quiet time in the morning when the world is mine own was over. So I figured, rather than wait another year, I thought I'll just move this to Christmas morning. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I've got up relatively early. It's not that early, I suppose, for Christmas. I've seen earlier Christmas mornings, but this year, certainly, having yesterday had some weird allergic reaction to something. I don't know what's going on there. It feels early. And hopefully today we'll be able to have this little moment together successfully. Now, as it turns out, it's probably quite good that yesterday wasn't a total success, because actually it gave me a chance to reflect upon something really rather funky. I was playing Breath of the Wild, and I was explaining to my brother-in-law the different features of the game, and I was sort of talking about how the shield that's on Link's back can be swapped out for another shield, and the swords, when they're dropped by enemies, you can swap them and they break and you have to change them, and all this other stuff. Essentially, the fact that the world's very fluid and there's lots of options, and he was suitably impressed. But my mother-in-law actually was sat here in this chair, and she seemed not remotely surprised. She was like, "Okay, right." And I was like, "Well, this is cutting edge. This is magnificent." And I think what I loved about her response was that she just assumed that that's the way computer games had always been, because that's sort of how she imagined them to be. And in many respects, I absolutely adore that, because this is kind of the journey that computer gamers have been on over the past 30 years. When we first played, for example, Zelda, we kind of imagined that anyway, that world, that sense of exploration, and the use of all this cool, funky equipment and this magical sort of setting. And I suppose in some respects we're now able to live what we'd always imagined. Previously, I suppose, such visceral, rich, adventuring experiences were reserved for reading Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, and playing Dungeons and Dragons, this kind of thing. And it's that kind of interaction with the game world that we're able to have now with games like Zelda, Skyrim, Witcher, so on and so forth. And so I really loved and appreciated that this wonderful woman had sort of reminded me that actually we're there, we're living this sort of the dream in so many ways, and the fact that she wasn't particularly surprised, not that she wasn't impressed, but she wasn't surprised, really reminds me to just take a moment and be thankful, because previous computer games or versions of these games were not quite that, and yet here we are today in 2017, soon to be 2018, I guess. Now, speaking of being thankful, this year my wife and I are continuing the tradition that we started last year of, I suppose, giving each other the gift of time. The time to revisit those things that we haven't necessarily given our full attention during the year. A couple of years ago, we decided to experiment by not just filling a stocking with all sorts of random crap and bits and bobs and stocking fillers, as they say, and instead we decided to hand over the time that we would have spent doing a colouring book that we usually only really interact with for one day properly. and use that time to revisit some of the things that we wanted to do this year, or that we're grateful for, that we want to really indulge in. And last year that was a great success. I was aiming to complete Zelda Skyward Sword. Finally, I did that by the end of January, or certainly by February, I do believe. There was, for example, playing more Alien Isolation, which I have managed this year, although I'm still yet to find a partner who can be with me, get an experienced partner, as it were, to be with me through that experience, because on my own it's a bit too scary. Although I have found someone, a great guy. We're going to have fun next year with that game. And so this year we're doing kind of the same thing, and some of the things that I want to revisit include, well, for a start, Zelda Breath of the Wild. I've just been talking about how, in that sense, we're living the dream, and I'm yet to first of all, I'm yet to complete the main story in this game, because I'm still exploring the world, still enjoying the texture of the landscape, but also crucially, over the Christmas period, I'd like to try and complete DLC Pack 2, the extra game content. It includes the extra Divine Beast and also a motorbike. So I really want that motorbike. So I'm going to be giving that a go. And again, just remembering how fortunate I am to be able to play this masterpiece. It came out in March and it's simply gorgeous. Something else that I got hold of this year that I'd like to invest a bit more time in is my Game Boy player. I only got it a couple of weeks ago, and since then I have been very much enjoying it, but the next few days will be days that are devoid of work. I don't have any deadlines or anything like that to try and meet, and so I can just dive into the Game Boy library. And in fact, since my brother-in-law is here, and he essentially gave me some of his Game Boy games a couple of years ago, we can both try and enjoy this on the TV, and see where it takes us, the nostalgia or the new experiences, for example with Minish Cap. I'm really looking forward to it. Next we have a film, Alien Covenant. No, this is more like it. A film, Spider-Man: Homecoming. Now my brother-in-law and actually my mother and father-in-law, all three of them hadn't seen this film yet, and I'm more than happy to take a hit for the team and watch it again over the Christmas period. It's a brilliant Spider-Man film, a lot of fun, and okay, he doesn't like the Tony Stark character too much because he thinks he's a bit too full of himself, but it's mainly about Spider-Man, so I'm sure he'll be fine. My brother-in-law, that is. I loved this film in the cinema. I got it as soon as I could when it came out. In fact, I got the DVD bonus disc and comic edition, which these days, getting a DVD with bonus content is really quite difficult. But the little comic that they included was also quite cool, actually. It's just a side story where Spidey has to go and stop some bad guys while he's in school, so he sort of gets in trouble at the end of the comic because he can't be in two places at once. Speaking of Spider-Man, a couple of days ago actually, I treated myself to this. The Amazing Spider-Man: The Wedding. It's the collection of comics that surrounded Peter Parker and Mary Jane's wedding, I think in the late 80s, 1987 maybe. And I've always wanted to read the story, not least because I'm curious as to how, let's just see, where is he? There he is. How the symbiote suit fits into the story. I want to know more about that. It is of its time, the art, the colour, the colouring and all that kind of thing. But it's a book that's, I don't know, it always has had me curious. It's a story that's always intrigued me, and I get to read it this Christmas. Now, when it comes to comics, I'm almost always in a status of having just being in the process of or being about to read a Batman story, and this year is no different. Starting with, actually, a book that I finished yesterday, because, as I say, yesterday was Christmas Eve, and that is Year One Ra's al Ghul, or Ra's al Ghul, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Year One Batman is a series that I haven't investigated too much, but when I saw this particular cover art, I was intrigued because he looks a little bit like Michael Keaton's Batman, but then the whole idea of Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul being dead, but his legacy is not dead, and then looking into the origin of Ra's al Ghul really intrigued me. And some of the artwork is genuinely quite gorgeous. So, for example, there's a sequence where Raz is in Japan, and they mimic especially, for example, here where he slits someone's throat. They mimic the sort of the lines and the color scheme of traditional Japanese prints. I very much appreciated that. It shows the patience of Ra's al Ghul. It shows the devotion that he has to his cause, and I particularly in this story appreciate the relationship that the complex relationship that he has to humanity. He talks about how we diagnose the health of a patient based upon the totality of its cells and whether or not all the cells are working together. He's comparing humanity and various aspects of the environment, animals, plants, pollution, to cells in the body and how they all have to work together. Yeah, he's not necessarily just wanting to kill humanity. He just wants about 80% of humans dead. So it's an interesting story, and Batman, having capped off and drained all of the known Lazarus pits in the world, is having to deal with unexpected consequences. It's pretty good. And finally, I have another Batman book to read, and this one is one that I picked up at the same time as the previous book. It is Batman Master of the Future. Now, this story is intriguing to me because it is a direct sequel to Batman Gotham by Gaslight. And Gotham by Gaslight is a fascinating Elseworld story. It's sort of set in like a Victorian version of Gotham, where Bruce is a tycoon, Batman is a sort of a trench coat wearing, sort of fairly, I suppose, primitive version of himself, but nonetheless, it just oozes atmosphere. It feels like a Sherlock Holmes sort of story, and I loved it, with one minor niggle, and that is that the story is kind of predictable. You know, they draw on one of the few real-world infamous criminals that they could have picked to put into this story, and if you're at all aware of crime and the history of crime from the period, indeed if you're just aware vaguely of the period, you'll have heard of this character. I don't want to spoil it, but you know. And so I thought that was a bit of a weakness. I thought I would have liked to have seen something a bit more original, and that's what this book proves and that is what this book, I think, promises, is a bit more originality. Master of the Future seems very intriguing. It seems also to have a bit of that sort of steampunky tension with the future technology and what that might mean for Gotham, and I'm very much looking forward to reading this. And so there you have it. That's my plan for the next few days at least. I'm so pleased that I did actually get to record this, because I do love this little tradition, and also I'm really loving this growing tradition of just giving myself that gift of time, not just filling my Christmas and the Christmas New Year period with I suppose knickknacks to distract me. Rather, I want to be focusing on those things that I want to enjoy, and so I'm also enjoying that a lot as well. Here's hoping though that this clears up, because it's not painful, but I certainly starting to feel it around my eye. Yeah. Anyway, it's Christmas. So I always hear that "It's Christmas" from the song, which I cannot put on this video for fear of copyright, but you know which song I mean. But yes, it's Christmas, and even if you don't celebrate Christmas, even if you don't particularly like Christmas, hopefully you have a relaxing few days planned in the build-up to the new year. And I don't know. I mean, what sort of things are you doing at this time of year? If you have some interesting stories or interesting ideas, please do comment below and let me know. And here's to another year, I guess. I really do appreciate this time of year, and I also appreciate this little ritual that we have going. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.